Hello, I'd like to talk to you about the root causes of psoriasis from a very specific mind-body framework called German New Medicine. In German New Medicine, we see that symptoms that we experience are the result of a tissue adaptation that's actually coming from what we call a biological special program, a program that our body is running that's ultimately for our survival, for our benefit. And that program runs because of an event that our psyche or subconscious perceives as shocking, distressing. It catches us off guard. It catches us on the wrong foot. And the specific flavor or type of perception that our psyche has about this event can set off a biological special program or a tissue adaptation that simultaneously affects a part of the brain and the corresponding organ, which in this case is the outer layer of the skin. So with psoriasis and related skin conditions like eczema, the specific flavor of that conflict is called a separation conflict. And this is when we are either separated from someone or something, some situation that we really want to be close to, but we can't be close to it. Or the opposite, when we are with something that we wish we could get away from, a person, a situation, an event that we really don't like, that we wish we could be separated from, but can't. So in that type of situation, if our subconscious perceives that as this type of separation conflict, which is a very strong push-pull, like, oh, I wish I could be close to this, or I wish I could be away from this, then that can set off a specific biological program that has to do with the outer layer of the skin. And in psoriasis, this has two phases. There is an active conflict phase when our psyche perceives this conflict to be ongoing, to be actively happening, and then there's the healing or resolution phase. In the active conflict phase, what our skin is doing is losing cells in a specific area. It's losing cells in that area. And the biological purpose of losing these cells is to create a loss of sensation. Because if you think about this biologically in nature, if you are separated from someone or something that is really important to you, that loss of cells creates a loss of sensation, more of a numbing that takes away some of the pain of that loss. Now, initially, a loss of cells in the outer layer of the skin will not be apparent, but if it goes on long enough and of more severity, then it will lead to those dry patches, flakiness, and scaling. So that is the active conflict phase where you get a loss of cells that leads to dry, flaky, scaling skin. And when that situation goes into a resolution, either the situation changes or your psyche perceives that it's safe now, that it's no longer an issue, then the healing phase commences. And in the healing phase, those cells in the skin are being restored. And when they're being restored, that is the phase where we see all of the redness, the inflammation, the fluid, the blistering, the itching. And even though this is really uncomfortable and terrible feeling, this is actually the healing phase of restoring the skin cells that have been lost during the active phase. So in psoriasis, what we're seeing is a really long duration, recurring conflicts, and actually two at the same time. One that is in the active conflict phase where you're getting the dry, flaking, scaling skin, and the other, which is in the healing phase, where you're getting the red, inflamed, swollen, blistery skin. So let me give you an example of how this might play out. So let's say you're in a job and you really don't like that workplace. It's super stressful. Maybe you have a boss that makes your life really miserable and you just don't want to be there. Your psyche could perceive that as a separation conflict of, I don't want to be close to that. So while you're at the office during the day, you're actively at the job, you could be in the active conflict phase where your skin is losing cells, and eventually that's leading to that dry skin, flakiness, scaling skin. When you go home in the evening or on the weekend, or when you go on vacation and you're away from the job, then the skin starts to come into healing because you're not in the situation. So you would get the itching, the red, the inflammation, the blistering happening. So that is one half of that conflict. But now let's look at it from another perspective. Let's say that that job is something that is really important to you. For a lot of us, our jobs are really part of our purpose. They might be part of our identity. They're how we make our money. They have a big purpose in our lives. And so part of us really wants the job. Maybe it's the job that we feel like we should care about. And so you might get that opposite, the active healing phase happening during the work, and then it swaps. And that's how in psoriasis, you kind of have both symptoms at the same time. You have this dry scaling skin, you have this red blistery skin, and that becomes a recurring or relapsing issue. And that's what kind of perpetuates the skin condition over time. So let's talk about some ways that you can approach psoriasis. So the first piece of detective work that you want to do is to try to go back to the origin of the symptoms. When did this psoriasis initially start, and what was going on in your life at the time? Where did you feel that push and pull of, oh, I want to be close to this person or this situation, or I don't want to be close to it? You know, think about the feeling of being torn or having this really big push and pull energy. You know, maybe there was a relationship that was sort of, you weren't really sure if you wanted to be in it or not in it. Maybe there was a career or job situation, maybe another family situation. Maybe you were contemplating a move. You didn't know whether you wanted to be here or there, near or far. So if you can go back and do the detective work to identify some of the origins, that in itself, making the connection, connecting these dots, may help to start a longer healing process to bring you out of this recurring cycle. A lot of times it's helping to see the origin. That's the big first step. Now, if that original situation is resolved, maybe it was years ago, then what you want to look for next are the triggers or reminders that are keeping that active for you in your mind. So that might be physical things like a location, interactions with a person, foods, physical places, or it might even be patterns of thought, like what ruminating patterns have come up for you that are sort of typical of the tension that you feel. And working through those patterns, kind of trying to discern what are the reminders, what are the triggers, can also help bring you out of the cycle so that you're no longer jumping back and forth between active and healing, which is perpetuating the symptoms and can help bring it into a more permanent resolution. So I know psoriasis is so debilitating and difficult, but take a look at your life and see where your psyche may have responded to events this way. And remember that your body is trying to help you. It's trying to protect you from the pain of that separation and ultimately rebuild stronger. And that is something that we can use as our benefit and for our hope.